one whenever you're ready. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's civic engagement webinar hosted by the California Community Foundation in partnership with the California Wellness Foundation, the Liberty Hill Foundation, United Way, and the Weingart Foundation. And today we'll be looking at two very important topics, two topics that are very close to all of our partner organizations, to the panelists that we have here today, and to everyone here at the California Community Foundation. If folks can please list their name and their organization in the chat, we would love to get a sense of who's in the room, and we'll also have an opportunity to engage with one another at the end of the presentations. We'll have some time for question and answers. Also wanted to remind folks that in the registration email, the confirmation email, you do have access to a digital bingo card. The email, you'll click on it, it'll load up a bingo card, and if you're able to, we ask that folks play along with us and check off or circle the words as we reference them and mention them in today's presentation. And Aurora, if you can please cue the poll. We have a couple of questions here that we would love for folks to answer, and I'll read these questions out loud. And folks, if you're a faster reader, please feel free to go ahead and answer them. You don't have to wait for me to finish reading the questions. Question one is for you to rate your current understanding of issues impacting youth. Okay. Question two, if you could please rate your current understanding of issues impacting immigrants. And then question three is, does your organization serve either youth or immigrants? So folks can please take a second, answer those questions. This is an opportunity for our team and the panelists just to get a sense of who's in the room. So we'll give folks just maybe another 10 seconds to see if we can give folks a chance to load up their phones or access the questions. Wonderful, seeing a lot of participation. Thank you so much. 73% of the folks in the room have participated. That's great. Thank you so much, everyone. Okay. Seeing a lot of folks have at least some experience in this topic, but they're able to learn more regarding issues facing youth. Similar trends, 60%, about 90% have some experience, if not more. Wonderful. You should see the results in the room. Some highlights here to the panelists and to the folks who are listening in. 65% of the folks in the room serves both youth and immigrants. Okay. I see 15% in the room have not historically served either demographic, but they're exploring ways. So definitely some opportunities to grow and share some skills in that sense. Wonderful. And then I see 76% of the room has some understanding, at least, of working with youth. That's awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you again, everyone, for participating in that poll. We'll have a survey at the end. We'll also be utilizing the chat feature for that. And we'll get right into it. So let me stop sharing my screen here and introduce our first panelist, Michael Sanchez, who is with LA County. Michael, you live this work every day, so very excited to see what your team is up to, what you're up to, and your thoughts on today's webinar.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I really do appreciate the opportunity here today that CCF is providing and CCF's partners. So I just wanted to first recognize that. I mean, meetings and gatherings like this certainly kind of speak to your dedication for the work that we do here. Not only on the topics that we're going to discuss today, but in large and at a whole. So I just want to start by just saying thank you. I really appreciated the opportunity to speak. And I'm now going to share my screen and hopefully you'll be able to start seeing this in just a few moments. So
We can
if
see
it's
your screen,
possible.
Michael, confirming.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much. It's always that moment of like, can I see it? Can I not see it? So again, my name is Mike Sanchez. I do work at the Los Angeles County Registrar, Recorder, County Clerk, and I am the communications manager. So I wear a couple of hats within the department, but primarily what I oversee are all of our marketing and communication initiatives, our outreach and advisory committee outreach as well. And as you can imagine, the department that I work in specifically focuses on conducting and administering elections within Los Angeles County. And it wasn't that long ago, actually in March, we had our first major election of this year, the March presidential primary election, in which I'm going to highlight some of the key elements that we conducted within that election, but also focus on some of the work that we've done historically and share some insights in what we've done throughout the years to ensure and engage the community, youth engagement communities, but also our immigration communities as well. So I wanted to set the table just a little bit here. I apologize. I'm hitting the next button. There we go. So I wanted to set the table just a little bit. Many of you may already know this, and this is something that we certainly express in opportunities that we have available to us. Los Angeles County is large. It is the largest local voting jurisdiction in the nation. We have close to 6 million registered voters, 5.6 million to be exact. But there also still is an eligible population of about 1 million folks who are eligible to vote, but may not be registered. And I just wanted to kind of, again, set that standard and set that right at the front, because it is something that we do not take lightly. It's something that we as a department, as a county, understand that we have a large job and task ahead of us to ensure that all voters from all walks of life have opportunities, understand their rights, and ultimately have access to be able to vote. And typically, my next slide would be some reports or statistics of expressing, the rich diversity that we as a county have. But today I decided to take a different approach and instead show some very elegant visuals from the primary election that really demonstrates the different diversity that we have in Los Angeles County. And these are all voters and election workers who did participate and volunteer in the presidential primary election. And as you can see within these photos, I mean, we truly are diverse in every respect, in every sense of the word, whether it's through age, cultural diversity, but also expanding through experiences and in age as well. And for those who may not know, Los Angeles County supports 19 languages. That's the most in any county throughout the entire United States. And we're proud to serve those. It's something that we not only have to do due to just state mandates, but it's something that we understand is assists in empowering voters to making their voices heard, being able to read the ballot in their preferred language, being able to receive materials to them so they can be educated and make informed decisions, being able to go out into outreach events. These are all, and having materials to be able to share in different languages. These are all reasons and examples of our commitment and things that we do internally to ensure that there is a diversity there. So engaging our youth and immigrant communities really does, we focus that on 3 specific pillars, empowerment through voting. So empowering through education and participation in our voting process, trust and connection, building trust and connection with our communities to ensure their voices are heard, something that we don't take lightly. More so in the last probably decade, I would say, trust has become a factor within the election space, that there has been some ups and downs in confidence in the electoral process, not just within Los Angeles County, but in the nation. And that's something that we are very mindful of and cognizant of, and something that we take very serious in nurturing our relationships and building trust and then maintaining that. Because at the end of the day, that's what ensures inclusive and equitable outreach strategy, but it indicates and also provides an inclusive and equitable democratic process. So these are the three pillars in which the county, the registrar's office specifically focuses on to ensure we're engaging our youth and immigrant communities and providing them options and information and education on how they can make their voices heard. But taking a small step back, when developing outreach strategies, when developing effective communication and marketing campaigns, we have to ask ourselves really the most simplest question. And that is, what are the specific challenges and barriers to engaging youth and immigrant communities? And it's okay not to know all of the answers or to know that answer in particular right off the bat. This is something that is challenging and a question that is complex through a variety of different channels. And it's a complicated question. And because what works for some individuals and some communities and may not work for others. So this is the question that we posed within the work that we do. And 20 years ago, we embarked on kicking off and creating a community and voter outreach committee that was designed to be able to bridge the gap between the communities that we serve and the registrar, recorder, county clerk, nurturing open communications, building collaborative programs so we can educate, meet, and reach voters and potential voters where they are, and really elevating our voter registration drives. And coincidentally, in good timing, yesterday we hosted and held our first community and voter outreach committee meeting in person at our department's new ballot processing center. And this is the first time that we had a chance to meet in person since the pandemic. So it was a very lively and vibrant conversation. We had a full agenda and we had a lot of very open dialogue that was productive, but also critical. And that's an important topic that we want to and welcome that criticism and constructive feedback, because without it, there's no way for us to learn and develop and create meaningful outreach programs. Within that dialogue and within that set agenda, we deliberately open and have, roundtable discussions. We ask folks to ask the hard-hitting questions. We encourage that because at the premise of what we're trying to achieve is to develop and really build trust through understanding. So when they ask and when there are questions asked from within their own organization or from things that they're hearing in their communities, they may not have the answers to them, and that's the position that we serve. We are the experts in administering an election, and to the extent possible, we do everything within our power to ensure and bring communities together to then develop comprehensive and meaningful programs. So engaging communities through this committee effort is something that we have developed over the last 20 years and has seen evolve over the last 20 years. Candidly speaking, it was something when at its inception, it was some comparable more towards a town hall where there was a lot more criticism and not as much collaboration. But again, nurturing that relationship and having regularly attended meetings and developing a network of like-minded folks who are all rowing in the same direction. Over time, it has built and developed into what we have now, which has been extremely meaningful, extremely powerful, and really at the cornerstone has been our number one asset in developing large-scale communications and community outreach programs. And I'm going to get into some examples here. through those community organizations and outreach committees, but also within them, their relationships and developing, we've been able to do some very unique and special things. We've been able to have STEAM events that you see on your left-hand side, where we were engaging youth and invited youth and schools and to come to our offices, have an opportunity to learn about the voting process as a whole, but also have an understanding of what it is and why it is important to vote and register to vote. On the right-hand side, you see more of your voting eligible population within school campuses. So making sure folks are educated in terms of if they're new to LA County. If a lot of students come and may not know that they are already eligible, or they may need to re-register if they're coming from a different county. These are things, and an example of a UCLA Democracy Day was an example. We went out there with a couple of ballot marking devices. We had an open conversation. We presented to them what their options were. And at the end of the day, it's through a student-led coalition, we're able to develop a partnership there and continue doing that work. Likewise, with on the bottom picture though is CSUN. A lot of these partners and what this partnership has opened is the ability for us to have voting locations on these campuses, which also contributes to education, outreach, and the physical act of voting. And the bottom right photo there is an example of a couple of students who were on election day able to register to vote for the very first time and again cast their ballot and make their voices heard in that election. So again, very important to highlight these different initiatives that happened within the last year. And the middle video that was replaying on loop was actually at a high school in the 22 midterm year, where we were able to actually conduct a district-wide voter registration drive. And that drive allowed us the ability to pre-register and register individuals to to vote, so that they could vote later in that year and ultimately for elections to come. So some examples of what we've done and what I highlighted in the previous slide is voting demonstration. These are things and components of our current outreach strategy that we provide and allow and conduct throughout the year, where we host voting demonstrations at schools for students to experience the voting process firsthand. This, again, coincidentally, good timing, this week, the Secretary of State identified as Voter Education Week. So we've been from Monday to present, attending a variety of different high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools, and conducting voting demonstrations. Being there with their leaders and their teachers and the principals on campus. And these are items and outreach strategies that we conduct throughout the year that's available for anyone who would like to reach out to us and conduct that. I mentioned already our partnership with colleges. Again, it's something that we've done ever since we have migrated to a vote center model. We've been very lucky to have such great partnerships with college campuses and universities to host ballot drop boxes or vote centers on campus. And within that partnership allows us the outreach component of having the ability to be on campus in advance to do voter registration drives and pass out information, so that folks who are newly registered or newly eligible or just moved from a different county or state have access to that. Student election worker program is another thing I definitely want to highlight here. It's a twofold component. It is one of three audiences that make up our election worker ecosystem. It also comprises of community volunteers and county and city election workers or city employees. And I'm very happy to say that students between the ages of 16 and 17 are potentially eligible to serve as an election worker. So again, it's dual purpose there, in that they have the ability to learn about the democratic institution a little bit more carefully. They're involved in it directly, and they're facilitating legitimately in an election and facilitating the act of voting for folks. And It also is in some ways like planting an additional plant to the or an additional seed in planting in the youth that serve, um, how important it is and why they should be continuing to be involved and civically engaged moving forward. And within this last election, we had 2,000 student election workers participate in the primary. So we're very happy to see that that statistic, and we're certainly continuing to work with a variety of different school districts and schools to continue to engage yeah, our youth to be involved in this. Lastly, our mobile voting program. This is a new program within the last 4 years that we were able to implement due to the new voting system and voting model. For those of you who may not know, our mobile voting program is, in essence, our ability to bring voting and the voting experience to community members and to community groups. And I want to highlight the video that you see here on the right. This was at an Ultimed healthcare facility in the city of Compton, who I will say, and we'll plug Ultimed. They have been an amazing partner with us in the last 4 years in providing their healthcare facilities to serve as mobile vote centers. And in this example, the individual that's in that video, she had just become a new citizen days before this mobile vote center. And it was through the partnership through Ultimed, through the partnership with the Southeast Los Angeles Collaborative and a variety of other partners that was able to communicate and get engaged with her, get in contact with her, and ultimately allow her to be able to vote just a couple of days before Election Day. And again, um, highlighting this effort even more, while we are very keen on ensuring our youth and our immigrant communities have access to voting, the mobile program as a whole is intended to serve all of our underrepresented communities, and that includes, voters with disabilities. That includes geographically isolated communities. That includes community groups who may be or that are assisting senior citizens. And that's something that and this is a new program within the last 4 years that we've seen gain incredible success. You can see there on the table that we've served over 2,000 individuals, and those individuals were able to vote and cast their vote at a healthcare facility, at their assisted living facility, or perhaps when they were walking on the 3rd Street Promenade and we were at a food market. And that's the other side of the mobile voting program that we are also very proud of it. While we focus on, through our Flex initiative, being very targeted and hyper specific, we also recognize we want to be have a large footprint. So we can be at locations such as Dodger Stadium. We can be at locations that have large gatherings. And we're very, again, proud to say that in the last primary, we had almost 140 different events throughout a 10-day voting period. I mentioned this previously in my remarks a few slides back about the ability to have and nurture relationships and partnerships. And the video and image that you see displayed on the right, and I believe I saw some members from Chirla joining here in today's meeting, really represents that. And this was in the 22 midterm election cycle, but we hosted and Chirla hosted and we participated in an outreach event that allowed us to ensure new citizens had information and resources available to them so that they could make their voices heard in that election. And in this last year as well, they also served as a Flex Vote Center at their headquarters. And again, a representation of dedication, commitment to serving our communities. This is I wanted to highlight this as a representation of that, and something that we will continue to, of course, embrace. The United States Citizen Immigration Services naturalization ceremonies. We attend those and have been attending those for several years. And that is something that we take very serious and jump on any and every opportunity available to us to attend any naturalization ceremonies. And through our partnership directly with CIS, we've been able to negotiate and partner with them and having our own outreach table within their naturalization ceremonies, which isn't often open and available to all within the actual ceremony. And the picture that you see there was actually a very iconic and historic moment at Dodger Stadium. And at that particular day, we had over 300 new citizens registered to vote, which is very exciting. The middle photo is something that we coordinated in this last primary election, and it speaks on the trust and continued engagement. We understand that newly registered voters, we understand that immigrant communities, we understand that those who may be low English proficiency or no English proficiency voters rely on and depend on ethnic and local media outlets to receive their news and information. So year over year, we partner with community groups to host and put together an ethnic media and local media briefing and event. And this is one that we did in Chinatown this last election, which again was very well attended. It picked up a variety of different news outlets and a variety of different news outlets attended. And we garnered a lot of good information and publication from that. And circling back to the previous point on the nationalization ceremonies, throughout the 2023 year, we were able to get over 1,500 new citizen registrations throughout our CIS ceremony. So again, a number that we're proud of, a number that we hope to continue to grow throughout the rest of this year, and highlighting also the number of events that we attended as the registrar, recorder, county clerk that had in some way an affiliation with both youth and immigrant communities. So I went through a variety of different programs and tactics and strategies that we deploy at the county level. I certainly can spend all day talking about this, and I probably am already over time, so I apologize if I am. I will say my last message here, I would please, if you have the ability, scan that QR code or get in or connect with me in the chat. Let's stay in touch. We have a very important election in the fall that will impact not just who will be representing us as United States president, but in many respects more locally, who will be representing us at the city level. Ballot measures and propositions that impact funding for community services here locally. It ranges, and that's an important topic and an important thing that we always convey, that while the headlines and the national narrative may be focused on the presidential campaign, the federal and state offices, it is the localized local measures, local districts that have a profound impact on what we do here and how we live within Los Angeles County, within our communities, and quite frankly within our families, and something that we want to reinforce so that way we can encourage folks to register to vote, make their voices heard, and cast their ballot in the ballot box later in this year. So with that, if there's an opportunity to attend an event that you might be hosting, if there's an opportunity to train you and or your organization so you can conduct your own voter registration drives, if you would like to request a voting equipment demonstration, or if you just need outreach flyers and you don't know exactly where to go, scan the QR code or call me or email me directly. I am more than happy and to put you in touch with the appropriate staff within my team so we can get you what you need to conduct this very important work. So with that, I will say thank you. I appreciate the time, and I will open it up for any questions.
Michael will actually be doing questions after all three panelists speak.
Perfect.
And you're not over. Thank you. You're not over time, my friend. We are right on time. Thank you so much for that presentation. Take a second here to ground us in the bingo game for those of us like if there are any nerds like me that are going all out with the different colors and playing the game. Michael, you talked about strategy. I heard references to partnerships and inclusive actions. And then this is all, of course, in the context of civic engagement. So thank you so much, Michael. And also to remind folks, we do appreciate any questions. Please use the chat feature if you have any questions. We'll definitely have an opportunity to interact with one another afterwards. So next, I would like to introduce Dawn L. Brown. Dawn is the president and CEO of Empower Her Institute, doing amazing work with youth. Dawn, please tell us about your programs and what you're doing, how you're approaching youth, and how your team is on the ground supporting leadership among our youth.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am excited to be here. I am going to share my screen.
Confirming we can see your PowerPoint on.
Okay, great. Okay. So, Empower Her, I'm just going to do a quick overview. I'm going to focus primarily on youth because that is who we serve primarily, and really talk about effective youth-led / youth-guided strategies and what we have found to be successful. Empower Her Institute, we've been around for 21 years. Here in LA County, we serve all girls of color. So we serve BIPOC girls and youth. We do serve a percentage of non-binary youth as well. And we have, I want to give you sort of a quick history of recent history of the organization and sort of how we have gotten to where we are in focusing or shifting our focus to be youth-led and youth-guided. As an organization, our founder retired in 17 years into leading the organization in 2020. And at that time, they brought me in right in the middle of a pandemic to run the organization. The organization had historically, because our founder was a pregnant teen who started the organization after becoming quite successful in the tech world, the organization was focused on dropout prevention and pregnancy prevention. That's what we were doing. When I came into the organization, I told the board even before I was hired, we're going to make a big shift because those numbers are low. And so congratulations, you did it. The numbers are low. And so now we have to shift to where we are today and what do young people want and what do young people need today. And so we shifted to be a organization that was social justice, that functioned through a social justice framework and was youth-led / youth-guided as an organization. And so our vision shifted. And so the vision you see is a vision that was introduced in December of 2020. And we begin to focus on our primary goal of breaking generational cycles of poverty. That's really important as you learn about the work that we're doing because of the fact that our total pedagogy has shifted. And so what I did, I come from that background. I come from a social justice, gender justice background, and focusing on youth-led. I've been doing that for 21 years, and so 25 years, sorry. And so I really spent time talking to the young people. And because we were on Zoom, I was able to do that, right? And finding out what was important to them and surveying and asking questions, and really then designed a 6-month growth and expansion strategy for the organization. So we have a full plan in place. And that was where I was able to come in and say, see, here are the stats. This is what the girls are saying. So now I can shift this organization with proof that this is where we need to go as an organization. So we introduced new values. One of the things that was happening with the organization at the time was when we first started having these conversations, we had a board meeting with the staff and the board, and the board kept saying, this is what we want our girls to do. Our values are going to be based on what the girls should be doing. And I was like, no, the values are what we do internally first. And then we take that externally and we have those expectations of our young people. So we have to have all of that involved. we had young people actually sit in and be a part of those conversations. And I remember in the beginning of those conversations where we would say things like, I would hear board members say things like, well, we are going to use this type of language. They would say a certain word, and the young person would say, well, actually, that's offensive because of this. And because the adults couldn't come up with a better word, they said, well, it's fine. We're still going to use that word because it's fine. This is what it really means. And I had to step in and say, you just had a young person tell you no, listen, right? And so when we built those values, that's where they were built off of. When I started with the organization in 2020, we were an organization that our budget was $380,000. We were serving 400 girls with at 4 schools, Title I schools, and we had 2 staff members, including myself, the CEO. We now today have served 1,030 girls. Last year we served 1,030 girls. We're serving 1,000 girls each year. We are doing that right now at 11 schools and a community site. So we have 12 different sites, and our goal, we will be at 15 schools by the end of this year. 15 locations, 14 schools and 1 community site. And our budget has grown to a $2.4 million budget. I only shared that because as I start to talk about funding and the programs that we do, I want you to sort of understand the size of the organization. And so you can look at what you can do if you are smaller or larger, and where you can make some adjustments, right? Because obviously you're not going to be able to implement everything today. And we did it in levels. And we have 13 staff. So we are still considered a small organization, even with all of that. We are in the schools on a weekly basis. So you can see who we serve and what it looks like. And one of the big things that we hear all the time is, wait, you only serve kids of color? Like only girls of color? Like, how does that work? And I'm like, yeah, that's who we serve. And we work with young people from marginalized communities, and that's what it is. I mean, less than 1% of the youth that we serve are white. This is our pedagogy. So one of the things that I came into was like, how do we shift and be very clear about be very intentional with our pedagogy? And so we are intersectional, and we focus on social emotional learning. And so you can sort of see trauma informed care through the adverse childhood experiences, the ACEs. We actually are a lived experience organization. 51% of our staff and volunteers must reflect the community that we serve. That is a policy. And actually right now, and since I've been here, and even actually since we've existed as an organization, it has never dipped below 90%. So right now we're at 90% of our staff have not only the education, but the lived experience as well. And they reflect the community in which we serve. That is extremely important because we believe in, if you can see her, you can be her. And so we also have a policy in place. So this is not just a practice of ours, but it is a written policy that 51% minimum of our dollars have to go to vendors that reflect the community. So they have to be BIPOC vendors, women vendors, vendors that are LGBTQIA+, and beyond, right? So that is how we practice. And that, I think that's the first part of this when we talk about young people, is like, how are we walking our talk first? And then we start having conversations about what we do as an organization and how we're able to integrate our young people into the leadership component of that. We have a school year program it is year round. We are in the schools every week. So we see our girls every week. We're seeing in that in-school program, there's over 900 girls enrolled. So we see them on a weekly basis in the classroom. They're getting credit for the class. It is a focus on social emotional learning, skills-based learning, and mentoring. That's what we do. And we really focus on, and so we have our Girls Academy and our Leaders Academy because we're in middle and high schools. We're only working with Title I schools. It's really important to sort of, and so now I'm going to talk about how we get the youth involved in how we're doing our work. The Girls Academy was there when I started. The Leaders Academy, we were only doing once on Saturdays, once a month, and that was for high school girls. But it was for the girls who were alumni. And the Leaders Academy started because the girls themselves in middle school said, wait a minute, I finished middle school, you just gonna abandon me? Hold up, I wanna keep going. And so we listened and said, what would a program look like for you now? We went back to the table and designed a leadership program. Then when I came in, I said, well, we got to make this weekly. The girls were like, that's not enough. So once a month is not enough. And so we shifted it to weekly. And we were getting all these calls from young people in the community that were like, why is it only for alumni? So we shifted it and said, we're going to open it up for any young person in the community who doesn't attend any of the schools that we work with. And then we started to go into high schools and partner with high schools so that we're also doing the leadership programs in the high schools as well. And so that's sort of an example of how our programs really begin to become youth guided. Our summer camp, which is a social justice STEAM camp, it is the first and only of its kind in the country. We pride ourselves on innovative programs that came from the youth. The parents were saying, you all are giving scholarships for summer programs, but we trust you. So what can you do for us? And so when I came in, I'm a big fundraiser. I said, okay, I'm gonna find the funds. What would a summer camp look like? And we sat down, and my program director of programs and I sat down, and we decided to do a social justice STEAM camp. The first year was virtual, and we focused, and it was a pilot year. We always pilot our programs first. So we do a year to two of piloting before we even launch our programs officially. And we do a lot of the heavy evaluation during that, and we work with an outside evaluator. So when we did this camp, initially, it was focused on social justice, specifically around gender. The girls themselves in the camp was like, this is great. I'm learning coding. I'm doing all this cool stuff, but I want to learn about environmental justice. That's just really important. And so many of them said that we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, how do we shift the camp now that we can go in person? Today, it is an environmental justice-based camp. We focus on marine biology. They are actually trained as marine biologists for the summer. Our middle schoolers are trained, high schoolers work the camp. And so it's a 5-week, 2-session camp. And we actually teach them everything from coding to understanding marine biology. They're snorkeling, they're kayaking, but they're learning how to scuba dive, and they're getting scuba diving certifications and sailing certifications. My youngest certified scuba diver is an 11-year-old Black girl, right? So people were like, there is no way that you are going to be able to have kids that young scuba dive. But we did it. We did it because we had the faith that they could do it. And we really look at the maturity level, and we work with them to get to the levels that they need to. But in the camp, and social justice STEAM is a big initiative for us in general. So we do this in our in-school program as well as our camp in different ways. The girls have to work on projects. So they actually identify social justice issues that are important to them. They utilize STEAM techniques to address or amplify those issues. We are hands off. We give them the training, and then we say, you have to figure out what issue you want. You got to figure out what STEAM technique, and then you tell us what you need. So if you want to do, we had a group that wanted to build an app. Then we said, okay, now we have to find someone who can teach you how to build an app. But we step out of it so that it fully is youth led. And when they need help in the summertime, when the middle schoolers need help, we bring the high schoolers in, and they get paid to train the middle schoolers and support them. So we really are at a place where we're trusting them. And that's where we come from, that youth-led perspective, right? And so we have adults, like we've gotten teachers calling us and counselors saying, these issues are too heavy. Why? These issues are too heavy that you have the young people working on. And my response back to them is, but they chose them. We didn't choose them. We weren't involved. They chose them. They chose school shootings. You have them doing, shooter drills every month. Why wouldn't they choose school shootings, right? They chose youth suicide prevention. They choose some really heavy topics, and they choose things like the cost of college, right? And so it's really great to see the things that they come up with and they design. And then we said, okay, let's take it to the next step, and let's look at how we can build a competition around it, because our girls were like, we want to make money. And so we started to do that. And so the first place winner gets like $1,000. And so we're able to do that. But everyone gets something, even if it's just a field trip to Disneyland, right? So everyone gets something for the work that they put into it. And then when we look at things like our Girls to Greatness Teen Summit, which we just had on Friday, which we brought 650 girls together for this awesome day, at the LA Convention Center. It is a powerhouse day. Even when we looked at that, we talked about how can we take our young people and have them involved in the planning. So we had real conversations with them, and they were involved in all the steps of the planning. They told us what they wanted in the gift bags. They told us what color the shirts needed to be. They were on the stage making decisions and presenting. And I had to step back. And that's usually things that I do. I love doing those things, but I had to step back and give them the opportunity. One of the things that we introduced last year is our youth advisory board. And so we've done this in steps. Now we are like fully youth led, but it took us steps to get there. We have a youth advisory board where we take a representative from each of our schools. So right now we have 10 girls. We can have up to 15 on the board. They come together on a weekly basis, virtual. 1 week is virtual, the next week is in person. So that's how they meet. And they are advisors to the program team and to myself as the ED. So they are advisors to the director of programs and myself as the executive director. And so they actually are involved with the decision making. We have to share the budget with them. They actually have to learn Robert's Rules of Order. They have to read it. They go through training. I did a whole training with them around implicit bias and affinity bias and consensus building. They're learning these really like complicated concepts. And then they are decision makers within our organization. The president and the vice president of that youth advisory board sit on our board of directors. They are there. And we started it by having them shadow. All the officers had to shadow a board member. They had to come into a board meeting where I was talking about the budget, talking about where we were going this year. They're involved in that. They make decisions about if I get a salary increase or not. They're involved in those discussions. We introduced a philanthropy initiative this year, and our youth advisory board are the ones who make the decision. So we were able to talk to a funder who gave us $70,000 and said, I want a portion to go, 30 to go to the kids and the program and the development of the program. And then we pitched that $40,000 goes to different nonprofit organizations that are actually apply for funding. Our girls, the youth advisory board decided on the RFP. They created the RFP. They were the ones who reviewed everything. They were the decision makers. They even went to different foundations and shadowed different roles within foundations so that they could learn about philanthropy from that standpoint. So, and that's how, they were at CCF. It was one of the places that they went. So we really, when it came to who got the 40,000, all I did was to facilitate. I couldn't make any decisions. The adults in there were told you are not allowed to speak. You have to, unless you are helping them, helping them in stopping them from, disagreement. But disagreement is good. So only if it gets unhealthy. It never became unhealthy, so we didn't have to. And so they were the ones who made those decisions. With our CPR program, when we wanted to train our adults in CPR, we trained our staff, and then we were like, hold up, why are we hiring someone to do this? Why aren't we having our youth do it? So we actually trained young people, worked in collaboration with the Red Cross, and we have young people who are not only certified as CPR themselves, but actually they are certified as CPR trainers. And so on Friday, one of the workshops that was taught was they got to actually teach CPR to other young people and to their peers, and they got paid for that. And so now they are employed. They can actually work for us. They are going to be teaching CPR and certifying and training the adults, the parents, the staff. They are who we use instead of hiring an outside consultant. So when we talk about how we do this work, from every area, we are thinking about young people, and we're stepping back and we're listening to them, and we're letting them tell us where to go. And it is not easy all the time because, sometimes it is quite fearful to say, oh, they get to decide my salary. But They do a great job and they ask the right questions. And we're doing this with our middle schoolers and our high schoolers. So our youngest one, 11 years old, she's sitting in there making the same decisions that the 17-year-old makes. And they support one another throughout the program. So that's sort of a case study of how we do it. We actually, even from the hiring of our staff, so even when we talk about hiring our program staff, when I came in, I was like, what's our hiring practice? And I was like, no, the young people have to be involved in that. This is what youth led means. And so they actually have to interview any program candidate has to go before them. They have to do a presentation so that the girls can see how they would instruct a class. And then they go through an interview process with them. And let me tell you, they are tough. They are the toughest ones. Like, they're like, what do you bring to the organization? Like they are asking deep questions that I never would have thought of asking sometimes. They give scenarios, but they come up with it themselves. And then I come in, or our director of programs, and we say, what do you think? What are your thoughts? And here's the thing, they have veto power. So they don't have final decision-making power in hiring, but they have veto power. If they say no to a candidate, no matter how much we love them, it's a no. We don't move forward with that candidate. They have to say yes for us to move forward. And there have been times when we've been like, oh, we're not going to be able to move forward with that candidate. We think it's a good candidate, but the kids brought up some real red flags. We had a candidate who came in and they didn't have the confidence that they needed. And the girls literally was like, wait a minute, you're talking about you shy and you don't have confidence? Your job is to teach us about self-confidence and to support us in building our voice. How are you going to do that? And so they asked that question in the interview. And then afterwards, they said to me, Dawn, you know what? I don't think that she's right. Give her a couple of years and she may be ready, but right now she's not ready to teach us. It sounds like she needs the program. So like, I was like, whoa, but that's like the confidence level that they have built. The girls who do our youth advisory board, after they gave that money out, their like confidence is on like 1,000. Sometimes we gotta be like, slow it down. Because what I love is that they say Empower Her walks the talk, right? Like, they say that. We don't say it anymore because they say it. They're like, they give us way more power than any other place I've ever been to. Like, they take it to the extreme, which is really funny to me. They're employed with us in the summer and they don't make minimum wage. Well, now it is minimum, but they've been making $20 since I came in. They make $20 an hour. Now that minimum wage has increased, we're going to take it to 22 for them because we want them to know their value. We can't teach them about job readiness and workforce development, how to navigate systems. They're literally learning how to navigate like, microaggressions in the workplace. They're learning how to negotiate salaries. We can't have conversations about their worth and then pay them minimum wage. So we always are paying them more. And we've had funders say, wait, you want me to give you money to pay them $22 an hour? Absolutely. Right? Like that's it. And so I want to give you a little advice as you think about how you can integrate some of these things into your program. And when we talk about, I do want to say, when we talk about, we break barriers. So one of the things that I forgot to put on here for advice is to look at where you can break barriers, look where the barriers exist, and then how can you break them based on your budget. So we have young people who only speak Spanish. We have a small number of young people who only speak Spanish. We have an app that they can use in the classroom so that the language is changed. We have we hire interpreters, and then our staff also is able to interpret for them. So we're able to provide those opportunities. I'm timing myself, Louise, so I'm making sure I stay within my time.
Thank you, John. 1 minute, thank you.
Yes, so I will be done in like a minute and a half at the most. Make sure that you are listening and then act. You can't just listen to them and then not act. Plan, pilot, and reassess. That's really important. Know that it's going to take a little bit more time. One of my favorite things to say, because I really truly believe this, is I hate when people say that they are the voice for a group. Well, I am the voice for the voiceless. There's no such thing as the voiceless. Just be quiet and give them the mic. And so step back. And so that's your ego talking. And so we're really big on that with our young people, is stepping back. And I wanted to quickly talk about funding strategies. When you're looking at doing real, like pitching new and innovative programs, I would strongly suggest that you look at small family foundations. That's where you're going to get the bang for your buck. Larger foundations typically, my experience has been that they have their funding strategies and they may not necessarily fall in alignment with what your initiatives are. And so and when you're talking about being innovative, that means that nobody was doing a philanthropy project and initiative. So I had to go to a small family foundation and say, let me give you this idea. I'm gonna plant the seed year 1, and in year 2, I'm coming back and I'm gonna ask you for the money. And so I came back, I asked them for 50,000. They said, you know what, I'm gonna give you 70, right? So, I would say to look at those. When you're doing your government grants, always put in youth stipends, always put them in. And then make sure that you are partnering with an outside evaluator during your pilot to do intense evaluation, and not just surveys, but real evaluation, finding out what they know, what they don't, and then where they're growing within the program. And then do your research, and don't be afraid to challenge yourself, your board, your funders, and the young people in who you serve. So that's my presentation, and happy to answer questions at the end.
Thank you so much for that, Dawn. That was amazing, and it's really it's so refreshing to me to hear that you're doing that work, because I mean, you just checked off so many boxes in what I wish so many programs had. Thank you again for that. Next up, I'd like to invite Sylvia. Sylvia, the floor is yours. She is joining us from BSP, aka Building Skills Partnership. Sylvia is the Director of Systems Change and Worker Voice. Please tell us about the work you're doing and how this idea of work and immigrant, like, how do these overlap?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Elise. And good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Sylvia Romo. I'm the Director of Systems Change and Worker Voice for the Building Skills Partnership. I wanted to thank our friends at CCF for the invitation to speak today, and for all of you for giving your time and attention. It really is an honor to share space with you all. I also wanted to start out by saying that we're somewhat new to this space of civic engagement and get out the vote work, formally, but we're really making every attempt to enter into it strategically and thoughtfully. So really welcome and encourage your feedback and your questions, and reaching out to us for any opportunities for collaboration and mutual learning. So BSP, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we're a statewide nonprofit, but we're unique because we're a labor management collaborative with the following mission, which is to improve the quality of life of property service workers across the state. There are about 45,000 workers that we serve statewide. We have 7 offices in Sacramento, the Bay Area, and in Southern California. And we were founded about 15 years ago out of a training and education fund that was established under the collective bargaining agreement between the janitorial industry and the SEIU United Service Workers West Union. So some of you might be familiar with the Justice for Janitors movement that established the USWW union back in the late 80s and 90s. It was a movement that began mostly in the LA area to organize janitorial workers in an industry that had become a subcontracted industry and was really a race to the bottom, very abusive and exploitative practices, and taking advantage of a vulnerable immigrant workforce, many of whom were actually immigrants and refugees from the US-funded wars in Central America. And so this union's always been groundbreaking. It was groundbreaking then as an organizing effort, and it continues to really lead the way in a lot of ways for lifting up the value of low-wage immigrant workers across the state and across the country. So we're very proud to be a partner with them in this work. So the property service industry, the bulk of our members are janitors. We've also expanded out to working with airport workers as well, and we have plans to expand to the last sector, which is security guards. And this is, more or less the demographics of the workforce. The janitorial side, it's, almost 100% immigrants from Mexico and Central America. low levels of English proficiency, lower levels of formal education attainment. So about a 6th grade average is what we're seeing. And it's mostly women. Actually, I think it says 60%. I think it's closer to 70%. It's also an aging workforce. So this is not a workforce, some folks might think that this is an industry where folks spend a couple of years and then move on. That's not the case. People stay in the janitorial field for decades. And of course, the industry wages are incredibly low, about $34,000 annually. On the airport side, it's a bit more diverse, although there's still a strong component of immigrants in the workforce as well, but from a wider array of countries. And there are a lot of African-American workers, and this stems from a history of, of employment segregation, where many of Black workers who wanted to seek employment in airports were limited to, cabin cleaning positions and service positions. And so that the legacy of that is still very much in place. And both of these industries were impacted really, really heavily by the COVID-19 pandemic, especially in the airports. 70% job loss was experienced by that workforce. So this slide is just to give you a sense for the programs that we provide. So we're primarily a direct service provider. We're known in some circles and workforce development circles as a high road training partnership. So basically, we utilize job skills training in collaboration with the employers as well to improve job quality and create pathways for career mobility for this workforce. And we also provide a hugely wide spectrum of supports and programs to this worker population and their families. We try to have a whole family approach and a holistic wraparound service approach. So this is just a little sample of the direct services that we provide since our founding about 15 years ago. And then COVID happened. And this, of course, it upended our service delivery model, which is a very familiar story for all of you, I'm sure. But more importantly, it really put the workers that we serve at the very center of myriad crises. This is a workforce that prior to COVID, we had often spoken of as an invisible workforce. It's night shift work. They go into the offices when everyone else goes home. But suddenly COVID hit and everyone was lauding them for being essential workers for the work that they always did in providing clean and sanitary office spaces and public spaces for our communities. And BSP, we completely shifted to triaging all the crises that these workers were facing, from unemployment to, income loss of different forms, health crisis. They were disproportionately impacted by the COVID pandemic. And we just came to realize that direct services are just not enough, that we have to be looking at the upstream interventions as well. We have to be looking at the structural origins of the injustices that these workers were suffering from, and that, no amount of ESL classes is going to provide immigrant inclusion and belonging, and no amount of workforce development classes can bring us to economic justice, or health workshops cannot lead us to health equity, right? Our mission really requires a both-and approach of the downstream interventions and the upstream structural work. So in our new strategic plan, we have a second pillar to our work beyond the direct service provision, and that's social justice systems change work, with those strategy components below it: worker voice, policy advocacy, research, partnerships, and narrative change. And you'll see elements of that throughout our civic engagement and get out the vote strategies as well. So why now? We really just got started with the systems change area of work in earnest in January is when we started to build out our team, but it happens to be the most consequential election year of our lifetime. And so building power and belonging is urgent and critical. I think that we all learned the hard way. We were surprised by Trump's election, that we can't take for granted the outcome of any presidential election. And so we need to lay that groundwork of solidarity and belonging and power amongst communities, especially immigrant communities that I'm sure will be targeted should the election in November go away in that direction. We learned that 50% of union members are not even registered to vote. And this, I will note, is even though they're in a union that's very politically active, still we see that enormous gap in registration. And again, we see this really vicious cycle that needs to be interrupted. And so we see ourselves as having a responsibility to do so, where these communities are low propensity voters, right? And so they don't get the time and the funding and the engagement from your traditional campaigns. And therefore, they feel less informed and less empowered to vote. And so they stay less likely to vote. And so, if we don't do a targeted approach to interrupt that vicious cycle, it's just going to continue. And that vicious cycle has meant really persistent and horrific turnout gaps. And those gaps, all research shows, need targeted mobilization efforts. So a generic get out the vote's not going to work. You need to have a tailored approach for the communities that are being consistently left out. So these are the strategies that we have decided to employ. We're going to lean in a great deal to the voter registration piece, because again, research shows that if you can close a registration gap, it really does a lot to, of course, close or narrow the racial and ethnic turnout gap. So we're incorporating voter registration messaging into all of our program touch points with workers and their families. Every single workshop, every class, every worksite visit. We have the flyers with the QR codes that lead to the online voter registration, how to find your polling place. We make sure it's linguistically appropriate, of course. We choose pictures of the workers to highlight in our outreach materials so that they see themselves reflected in the campaign and feel some ownership over it. And, the trusted messenger gets mentioned a lot, but I feel like it's especially essential when it comes to voter education, because civic engagement, when it comes to working with immigrants whose status and voting eligibility may be an unknown, it really requires a distinct approach where the trusted messenger piece becomes really significant. So this is a population that probably won't respond well to door knocking or calls from strangers. And you can't assume eligibility, and so you can't pry or do like a hard sell for, why they may not be voting or registering. So it requires a lot more sensitivity and trust building and a series of soft touches, and ideally touch points that come from their peers. And we're fortunate at BSP that we have a long track record already of touching upon sensitive subjects with this worker population, with financial counseling, know your rights, and immigration services, COVID education, vaccine access. And so that positions us well to be that trusted messenger. In terms of leadership development, this is essential, right? And I want to say, this isn't about like, I feel like leadership development can often take like a very paternalistic flavor where, they are leaders already, right? It's creating the spaces for them to be able to exercise that leadership muscle that they already have. They're not blank slates when it comes to, being empowered and critically thinking people. And they're clearly eager for opportunities to have their leadership built upon and recognized. And, we recently did a survey of about 700 workers, and, fully a little over 50% of them indicated that they were interested in joining a worker leadership council. So I think that just really speaks to that point. And the other aspect to voter education that I wanted to highlight in our approach is that it's beyond just voter education. It's larger than just what happens, at the ballot box, right? It's larger than just what's on the ballot and how do you vote and where do you vote. There's an opportunity here to go deeper with some political education that I think can really mobilize folks that are low propensity voters to make the effort to get to the ballot box. And so we have integrated information into our classes around the history of how, of the evolution of voting rights in this country, how as immigrants, we may have arrived recently, but we benefit from a long history of struggle, especially the civil rights movement, to expand democracy and enfranchisement in this country. We also surveyed folks on their quality of life issues. So now we can use that data as a springboard to help them understand how elections impact the issues that are their priorities as they define them. I think that's really, really powerful in terms of an inspiring and mobilizing messaging. Relational outreach is also key. And this goes to the trusted messenger piece, but I think this is true for a lot of communities, right? Folks who are unlikely voters, again, the stranger canvassing in the neighborhoods is probably not likely to motivate them. But if they have a conversation with a peer, someone from their family that asks them if they have a plan to vote, then it's much more impactful. So we're trying to build on that peer-to-peer personal relationship by paying workers to get trained and to make those phone calls and send the text messages and really ensure that that the workers know that this get out the vote effort isn't just happening at them, it's happening with them and being led by them. And of course, we will have, the touch points in the lead up to election day are very important just to make sure you're getting folks across the finish line. We're going to have mailers and again, text messages and phone calls and flyers to make sure that people do in fact mail in their ballot. We're also hoping to be a flex voting site in Los Angeles as well, at the union offices. Just to remove any and every barrier that the workers might face and getting their ballots to the box. And finally, coalitions and partnerships, of course, are really key. And we've started to do this work. We actually have a lot of inspiration from the Ultimate model that was referenced earlier. We've reached out to the folks at NALEO who already have a lot of expertise and resources in this regard, to people at Somos Mayfair over in the Bay Area, and we're just trying our best to find a strong network of collaboration across the state and all of the cities where we're present, because we're stronger together, and it only makes sense for us to work together to enrich our democracy. And these were my final comments. When it comes to civic engagement and immigrants, again, I think it's important to have a larger vision of the strategy that doesn't begin or end at the ballot box, right? This is about a larger project of empowerment and belonging and power building and, strengthening the health of our democracy. Because, immigrants are here, they have been here, they play an essential role. Either they're essential or they're not, right? And so if they're essential in their workplace, if they're essential because they're protecting public health, if they prop up entire sectors of our economy, then they're essential to our democracy as well, and they need to be valued and engaged as such. And building a sustained strategy is important. I think very often the mistake is made that, oh, an election's coming, let's just prop up something real quick to get folks out in November. When in fact, again, research shows in places like Georgia and in other states where transformation is really happening, that you need to have that sustained strategy of engagement and leadership development over the long term, and not just a pop-up 10 approach that's really transactional and it just appears and then disappears with the election cycles. And engagement can and should involve folks of different immigration status and vote eligibility, right? The conversation should not stop if somebody says, no, I'm not eligible to vote. They still have a role to play. They still should be informed and engaged in what's happening in their communities and in their democracies. They can be very powerful vote mobilizers as well. This is something I intended to mention earlier, but there's research that demonstrates that message of vote for those who can't is an incredibly powerful one. And immigrants who don't have eligibility to vote can really make that argument in a very strong way. And you know, and remember, and eligibility to vote isn't just about immigration status either, right? People are disenfranchised because of prior convictions as well. And so that political education of who in our communities has the right to vote and who doesn't is also a powerful way to build bridges between Black and brown workers, and to find that common ground of solidarity that can be really, really transformational. And again, voting is just one way to be politically engaged. They can be engaged in their, you know, local, state, national advocacy. They can go to the school boards, etc. And they're just a very underutilized source of power in this country. Again, regardless of eligibility, they do make a powerful voice and can be vote mobilizers in their families and their communities, especially immigrant women. You know, again, I always like to center the fact that, you know, close to 70% of janitors are immigrant women specifically. And so that tailored approach really requires acknowledging that, not invisibilizing it, and using it as a strength, because they have so much influence in their own households, in their churches, in their communities. They're usually the ones that are managing their relationships with outside institutions like schools and healthcare providers and the like. And so why not utilize those skills that they already have in getting them engaged in the political process? And I wanted to thank you all again for your time and attention. And really, I mean it when I say, please do reach out. We are looking for more opportunities for mutual learning and collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, for that amazing presentation and uplifting the work that you and your team are doing. So what I'd like to do in the last 10 minutes that we have, I'm going to ask the panelists to all come off of, to turn on your cameras if you're able to do so. And I'd like to try to do a lightning round. We have some questions in the chat. Thank you, folks. I also have a couple of things I would love to explore with the group. Michael, no pressure here, but two things that we didn't explore from our, yes, the bingo card, is this idea of social media and digital platforms. I don't know if that's something that's in your wheelhouse for LA County, but perhaps you can speak a little bit to either strategies or what you've seen in regards to those as tools for outreach or engaging.
Yeah, absolutely. I can take a stab at it. So that is absolutely within my wheelhouse. I oversee a very comprehensive development of both organic and also in developing a paid approach as well, where we do utilize contracted vendors and seek assistance in developing that. But what I can say is two things about that. Digital and social can't be ignored. I mean, obviously we do have grassroots efforts that I showcased previously in my slides that is more boots on the ground, people in front of people, which is a part of the equation. But the other part is on the digital and social side, especially for our younger demographic and really some of the other hard to reach communities, because of just the dominance that digital and social has, right? It's been growing year over year, decade over decade. There are studies, academia that's been researched that clearly states people are receiving their news digitally, on their mobile devices even, and that is those are trends. That's data and information that we track. So when we develop our materials, whether that is on social platforms or on digital communications, we're aware of it. So again, we're posting and publishing things that's relevant. Things that may be engaging. So again, that also falls into tracking and analyzing, you know, ensuring that what you're putting up there is actually being clicked on, viewed. So I can say without a doubt, knowing your audience, and if you have a specific goal to reach a specific audience, having a firm understanding or a general understanding of what motivates, persuades, or moves that audience would be helpful. And some of the examples that Sylvia was referring to as it relates to immigrant mothers and being dominant in their households, and that's a perfect example of, you know, tailoring creative content to reach that person and finding creative ways to do it. And it's not easy. It is a science and it's also an art, but it is worth when developing that product. It's essential to that. Secondly, on the digital landscape, still providing resources that your community members can access and amplify your or our trusted message. So as a county office, a nonpartisan entity, we are responsible for ensuring that we put out and disseminate nonpartisan information. For the past 4 years plus, we've always implemented prior to and throughout every major election cycle a comprehensive digital toolkit that's easily accessible online on our website at lavote.gov and also at toolkit.lavote.gov more specifically. And we create and produce and publish everything under the sun: flyers, informational materials. If CBOs are doing text banking or call banking, we put in scripts, talking points, videos that are played on our commercials, all within 19 languages. All that's centrally located and stored in a single accessible location. So again, we hammer the home of trusted messenger. We hammer home the point of trusted messenger. We are a messenger. We are esteemed an authority in many respects, but to points we've all made, who's relaying that message may resonate more if it's coming from someone up here, if it's coming from a relative, if it's coming from an organization that you interact with day to day or week to week, more so than once every couple of years. So we know that, we recognize that in our paid approach and through our organic channels, and we develop that. And prior to every major election cycle, we produce and share that information and link and resources. And literally, we try to the best of our ability to keep people to going back. We don't want it to be the best kept secret. We want folks to utilize it, and we've seen success over the past several years. So,
thank you for that.
I'll stop there.
Thank you. I'll also invite you to check out the chat. There seems to be an opportunity from one of our guests today in reference to perhaps the county could or might need additional biliterate and bicultural staff. And it sounds like they might have an organization that they'd love to connect with you. So happy to make that connection afterwards. Sylvia, you talked, well, actually, Don, you mentioned this idea of listening. And I have a question for you afterwards, Don. You'll take the last question in just a second. But Sylvia, can you tell us, what does it look like to listen, right? And to learn from that conversation? I know it's not fair to answer that in just 1 minute, but I'm wondering if you have an example how you try to take on that task of listening and then learning as an organization.
So it's an excellent question, and I think that the reason that we intentionally have worker voice as part of the strategy, explicitly in the title, the title of our work, is because we want to make a formal space where we are holding ourselves accountable, frankly, to making good on that. I think there's a lot of talk of including worker voice, but when it comes right down to it, can have such an expansive meaning that it means nothing. So in our context, what we're doing is we're engaging workers in a series of focus groups in each of the 7 offices on a monthly basis, statewide. And those are going to build up to, very much similar to what Don was saying, where a worker leadership council, which is almost like a parallel board and has representation of the workers that we serve statewide, around 20 workers. And again, they will be compensated, and we'll be doing leadership development, as well as getting feedback on our programs and the like. And I think that, so listening can have a lot of different forms. We did the online survey, which provided a lot of excellent insights. And one thing that I think is good about surveys is that they're anonymous. And so I think there's a certain amount of, honesty that we can get from those. So, but one thing that we're learning and we are still very much learning, right, about having a popular education approach to listening and incorporating feedback from workers, is that it requires building a muscle both internally within the organization to ensure that we're seeing through on what we're hearing from workers. And it also requires building the muscle within workers to provide honest, critical feedback, because off the bat, if you just say, hey, are we doing okay with this? Does this make sense? They'll say, yeah, it does, So it takes, you have to build up that trust as well. And we're also building the infrastructure for what do we do with that data when it comes in and how do we act upon it. So, I mean, I guess I don't have an answer for you yet, except that we are trying to ask ourselves those questions and build an infrastructure and a mechanism for ensuring that we are listening in a meaningful way and translating it into action.
Thank you for that, Sylvia. Do you want to point folks to the chat? There's a link to the SurveyMonkeys, and that'll help us as the California Community Foundation make these webinars more impactful, more meaningful. Dawn, 1 minute left here, and thank you for answering this in the chat. But the question is in regards to staff development, right? So how do you keep staff aligned with these youth-led goals and visions?
Yeah, so I mean, with staff turnover, sometimes you gotta, keep doing the same trainings, but we take a week during the summer and that we do a full week retreat. We actually give them the Friday off because they get so much information in the first 4 days. And one of those full days is just around youth-led strategies and what we do. We also really talk about, it's embedded in our strategic plan, and we go through that on a quarterly basis with our staff. So we're going back to what the vision is. And then when I hire my team, within the first 30 days of hire, I meet with them myself and every employee, no matter who it is, and I break down what our vision is for the organization, my vision for the organization, as well as what are the key strategies. And then the last thing is just challenging the staff because, they'll come and say, oh, well, this is what's convenient. And I'm like, well, I appreciate that that's convenient, but is it the most impactful for our youth? And so I'm constantly asking that question or challenging my supervisors back so that they can take it to their teams. And we do that on a regular basis. So that's how we do it.
Wonderful. Well, once again, I want to thank everybody here for joining us. We will be emailing folks a recording of this webinar, and that'll also include the SurveyMonkey. Thank you so much to our panelists, Sylvia, Michael, and Dawn. This was great. Thank you so much, and thank you to our guests for listening in.